My son sent me to a nursing home to sell my house. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't beg him to stop. I quietly signed every paper he put in front of me. He celebrated with his wife all week, laughing, making plans, spending money that wasn't theirs yet. But when they finally came to the notary for the keys, I said something he never expected, and that moment changed everything. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Good day, dear listeners. It's Lisa again. I'm truly grateful you're here with me today. What I'm about to share is not easy, but it's important. This isn't a story about sudden violence or loud cruelty. It's about something quieter and far more dangerous. It's about how love can be used as a weapon, and how betrayal often wears the face of concern. For 39 years, I lived in the same house on Willow Crest Road. It was a modest two-story home with light blue siding that had faded unevenly under decades of sun and rain. The paint chipped along the window frames, and the front steps creaked in a familiar way that told me who was coming before I even opened the door. It wasn't a perfect house, but it was mine, and every inch of it carried the weight of a life fully lived. My husband, Thomas, and I bought that house when we were young and newly married. We had more hope than money and more dreams than sense. The first winter, the heating barely worked, and we slept under 3 blankets, laughing about how romantic hardship was supposed to be. Over the years, we replaced appliances one by one, fixed leaks ourselves, and planted a garden that grew a little larger every spring. We raised our only child there. Birthday parties, scraped knees, slammed doors during teenage years, late-night talks when he was afraid of the world. All of it happened within those walls. Thomas died 6 years ago. Cancer doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It slips into your life quietly and starts taking pieces away until one day you realize everything has changed. When Thomas passed, the house became quieter, but it never felt empty. I could still hear him in the mornings, humming off-key while making coffee. I could still see him kneeling in the garden, dirt on his hands, smiling proudly at tomato plants that never seemed to grow straight. The house held his presence like a gentle echo. After he died, people worried about me. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives asked if I should sell the house, move closer to family, downsize. I listened politely and thanked them, but I stayed. That house was not a burden. It was an anchor. It kept me steady when grief threatened to pull me under. I was 71 years old. Cooked my own meals. I drove myself to appointments. I volunteered twice a week at the local library, shelving books and helping children learn to read. I met friends for bridge every Thursday evening and worked in my garden every morning, even when my knees complained. I lived alone, yes, but I lived well. And I believed my son respected that. My son's name is Andrew. He is my only child, and for most of his life I was proud of the man he became. He was intelligent, well-spoken, and successful. He had a good job, a comfortable life, and a wife who looked polished and polite. After Thomas died, Andrew began calling more often, every Sunday without fail. He visited twice a month and sometimes brought Melissa with him. At first, their concern felt comforting. They asked if I was eating properly, if I needed help with errands, if the house felt too big. I always told them the same thing. I was fine. But slowly something shifted. Andrew stopped sitting during his visits. Instead, he walked through the house, his eyes scanning everything. He paused at the staircase, staring up at it like it was a problem that needed solving. He opened cabinets, touched door frames, ran his hand along the banister. "These stairs are pretty steep, Mom," he said one afternoon. His voice casual but his eyes sharp. "They've always been steep," I replied with a laugh. Melissa smiled, but her smile felt rehearsed, like she was practicing sympathy rather than feeling it. On another visit, Andrew pointed at the rug in the hallway. That could be a tripping hazard. A week later, it was the bathroom tiles. Too slippery. Then the driveway. Too uneven. Then the kitchen counters. Too high. Everything about my home, The same home that had safely carried me for decades suddenly became dangerous in their eyes. "We're just worried about you," Melissa said softly one day, resting her hand on my arm. But something about the way she said it unsettled me. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were calculating, measuring the room, the furniture, the space. They never asked how I felt. They told me how I should feel. They spoke about my life as if it were already behind me. Their visits became more frequent. Once a week, then twice, then 3 times. Andrew began bringing pamphlets with him. Assisted living facilities, retirement communities, short-term care options. "Just to look," he said. "No pressure." I refused. "I'm not ready," I told him calmly, firmly. His expression tightened, just for a moment. "You don't have to be ready," Melissa said gently. "We just want to be prepared." Prepared for what? I was still gardening, still driving, still laughing. But their concern no longer felt like concern. It felt like a plan forming around me, one I wasn't invited to participate in. The tension grew quietly. Conversations became strained. Andrew's patience thinned. His voice carried an edge it hadn't before. "You're being stubborn," he snapped once when I refused to tour a facility. "I'm being independent," I replied. He didn't like that answer. The day everything changed was a Tuesday morning in early autumn. I remember because the air smelled like damp leaves and the garden needed watering. I had just finished outside when Andrew's car pulled into the driveway. He hadn't called. Melissa stepped out of the passenger side, and between them stood a man I didn't recognize, dressed in a gray suit and holding a leather briefcase. "This is Mr. Collins," Andrew said. "He helps families plan for elder care." They sat me down at my own dining table. The same table where I'd helped Andrew with homework, where Thomas had carved holiday meals, where laughter once filled the room. Papers covered the surface, sliding over old scratches and watermarks that told the story of our family. Andrew's voice sounded calm, rehearsed. "Mom, we need to talk seriously about your future." I said one word. "No." Melissa sighed. Andrew didn't meet my eyes. The man began speaking, his words flowing too fast for me to follow. Legal terminology, long explanations, no pauses, power of attorney, care agreements, property planning. My head spun as papers were pushed toward me. Andrew slid a pen into my hand. "It's just a formality," he said. "Trust me." Some part of me still wanted to. He was my son. The boy I had raised, protected, sacrificed for. So when he pointed to the signature lines, I signed. Once. Again. Each signature felt heavier than the last, though I didn't fully understand why. When I finished, Andrew smiled. A real smile. He hugged Melissa and kissed my forehead like I was a child who had finally behaved. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "You won't regret this." They left laughing, chatting about plans I wasn't included in. I sat alone at the table, staring at my hands, trying to calm the strange tightness in my
chest. That's when I noticed the paper they had forgotten. An appraisal. My house. $810,000. My hands began to shake, because in that moment, the truth finally settled in. They were never worried about me. They wanted my house. And I had just signed it away. For a long time after Andrew and Melissa left that Tuesday afternoon, I remained seated at the dining table. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I stared at the appraisal paper like it might disappear if I looked at it hard enough. $810,000. That number echoed in my mind, loud and unforgiving. It was more money than Thomas and I had ever had at one time in our entire lives. Money we had never chased, never thought about, never measured our love or our work by. And now it was the reason my son had decided I no longer belonged in my own home. The house felt different after that. Not quite the way it had felt after Thomas died, but hollow. Like something had been scooped out from the inside and replaced with cold air. I walked from room to room that evening, touching things I had never thought to touch before. The door frame where Andrew's height was marked year by year in pencil. The dent in the hallway wall from when he'd thrown a baseball inside against my rules. The small crack in the kitchen tile that Thomas had promised to fix and never did. These weren't just objects. They were pieces of my life. And now, according to the papers I had signed, they no longer belonged to me. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew's smile after I signed those documents. Not the smile of relief or gratitude I expected, but something sharper. Something satisfied. I replayed the afternoon over and over in my mind, trying to remember exactly what I had agreed to. Power of attorney. Property arrangements. Care plans. I hadn't read them properly. I hadn't been given time. They'd spoken so quickly, moved so confidently, like this was all routine. Like I was just another task to be completed. The next morning, Andrew arrived early. Too early. He brought boxes. So did Melissa. They moved through the house with an efficiency that made my stomach twist. They didn't ask before touching things. They didn't hesitate. "You won't need most of this where you're going," Melissa said cheerfully, lifting a framed photo of Thomas and setting it aside without waiting for my response. I watched silently as they sorted my life into piles. Keep. Donate. Sell. Trash. My grandmother's china went into a box marked estate sale. The books I'd collected over decades were stacked carelessly, spines bent. When I reached for something, Andrew gently took it from my hands. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "We'll take care of everything now." That phrase again. "We'll take care of everything." As if I were already gone. They worked for hours. By noon, my living room looked like a stranger's house mid-move. Boxes everywhere. Empty shelves. Bare walls. I sat in my armchair and said nothing. Melissa glanced at me a few times, her eyes flicking over my face like she was checking for cracks. "You're very quiet," she said lightly. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Inside, my thoughts were racing. I was afraid. Not just afraid of losing my home, but afraid of what this meant. Afraid that my own son saw me not as a person anymore, but as a problem to solve. Or worse, an asset to liquidate. That evening after they left, I found another document they had overlooked. A brochure for the nursing home. Sunnyridge Care Residence. The photos showed smiling seniors, manicured lawns, and clean hallways. But the words beneath made my chest tighten. Long-term care. Memory support. Structured living. Memory support. Was that how they planned to explain this? I was confused? Forgetful? Incapable of managing my own affairs? The following days blurred together. Andrew and Melissa came every morning. They packed. They talked about timelines. Monday, they said I would move to Sunnyridge. Tuesday, the house would be listed. Everything was already arranged. Already arranged. They spoke over me, around me, about me. Never to me. I began to understand something important during those days. They thought my silence meant acceptance. They thought I was resigned, frightened, and defeated. And maybe a part of me was frightened. But another part, a deeper part, was waking up. At night, alone in my bedroom, I let myself think clearly for the first time. What exactly had I signed? How much control had I given away? And why did Andrew look so relieved, so happy, the moment I put that pen down? On Thursday night, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold and finally allowed myself to feel the anger beneath the fear. Not a loud anger. A steady one. The kind that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. This was my house. Thomas and I had worked ourselves raw to pay it off. We had skipped vacations, delayed repairs, worn clothes until they frayed so that mortgage payment was never late. And now my son wanted to turn all of that into a celebration fund for himself and his wife. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't stupid. And I wasn't finished. Friday morning, after Andrew and Melissa left with another load of boxes, I did something I hadn't done in years. I put on my coat, locked the door, and called a taxi. I went to the library. It was a small thing, but it felt like rebellion. My friend Carol worked there. We had volunteered together for nearly a decade. When she saw me, her face lit up, then clouded with confusion. "I thought you were moving," she said. Not yet, I replied carefully. Carol, I need help. We sat in a quiet corner, and I told her everything. About the papers, the pressure, the appraisal, the nursing home. As I spoke, her expression shifted from concern to alarm. That doesn't sound right, she said slowly. Did you have your own lawyer when you signed? I shook my head. She leaned closer. Eleanor, you might have been taken advantage of. The words landed heavily, but they also brought a strange sense of clarity. Taken advantage of. That was exactly what it felt like. Carol wrote down a name on a scrap of paper. Linda Park. She's an attorney. Does pro bono work for seniors. Her mother used to volunteer here. Call her. My hands shook as I dialed the number. When Linda answered, her voice calm and steady, I explained everything in a whisper, as if Andrew might somehow hear me through the phone. When I finished, there was a pause. Mrs. Carter, she said finally, I need to ask you something important. Do you have copies of the documents you signed? No, I said. They took everything. All right, she replied. Then we need to get copies. Do you remember any names? Company names? Anyone involved? I closed my eyes and thought hard. Sunnyridge Care. The man's name. Collins. And then something else surfaced in my memory. A business card he'd given Andrew. It might still be in the trash. Good, Linda said when I told her. Don't sign anything else. Don't agree to anything. And when are they planning to move you? Monday. That gives us time, she said. Not much, but enough. I'm going to help you. When I hung up, my heart was pounding, but for the first time in days, I felt something else too. Hope. Saturday morning, I woke early with purpose. Andrew and Melissa wouldn't be back until noon. I went straight to the kitchen trash. There it was, exactly where I hoped it would be. Mr. Collins' card. Harper Residential Services. I called the number, forcing my voice to sound sweet and confused. I signed some documents earlier this week, I said. I seem to have misplaced my copies. The woman on the phone didn't hesitate. Of course, Mrs. Carter. You can come by and pick them up. By the time Andrew and Melissa returned that afternoon, I was back home, sitting quietly in my chair, the way they expected. They didn't notice anything different. They didn't notice the resolve settling into me like armor. That night, I met Carol outside the Harper office. They handed me a folder thick with papers. As we sat in her car and went through them, page by page, my blood ran cold. Power of attorney. General. Unlimited. Andrew had full control over my finances, my property, and my legal decisions. There was a deed transfer, too. My house is already placed in his name, and a clause stating I waived my right to contest the sale. I felt dizzy. That's everything, Carol whispered. Not quite, I said, suddenly remembering something else. My bank accounts. On Monday morning, before Andrew was scheduled to take me to Sunnyridge, I went to the bank. And that's where I learned the final truth. Andrew had already moved $42,000 from my savings into an account with his name on it. My life savings. Gone. I stood there gripping the edge of the counter, my ears ringing, my vision narrowing. $42,000. The money Thomas and I had set aside for emergencies, for security, for dignity. I left the bank shaking, but no longer uncertain. By the time Andrew came to pick me up, I was ready. And he had no idea what I had already done. By the time Andrew knocked on my door that Monday morning, my hands had stopped shaking. That surprised me. I had expected fear to overwhelm me, expected my legs to give out beneath me, expected tears. But instead, what I felt was a strange calm, like the moment before a storm breaks. I had spent the weekend uncovering the truth piece by piece, and once the truth is fully seen, fear loses some of its power. Andrew smiled when I opened the door. He was already wearing his jacket, keys in hand, confident in control. Melissa stood behind him, scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. Ready, Mom? He asked brightly. Sunnyridge is expecting us. I nodded and stepped back so they could enter. My suitcase sat by the stairs, packed just enough to look convincing. Andrew glanced at it with approval. He liked efficiency. He liked things neat, and final. As we walked toward the door, he paused, looking around the living room. "You'll be more comfortable there," he said, almost to himself. "No stairs. No worries." I said nothing. The drive to Sunnyridge was quiet. Andrew hummed to the radio. Melissa texted rapidly, smiling at her screen. I stared out the window, memorizing the streets, the trees, the familiar turns of my neighborhood, as if I might never see them again. Sunnyridge Care Residence was exactly what the brochure promised.
Clean, bright,
neutral. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and artificial flowers. A woman at the front desk greeted us warmly, using my name as if we were old friends. "We have your room ready," she said. "Your son is taking care of everything." That phrase again. Taken care of everything. They showed me the room. A single bed, a dresser, a chair by the window. It was tidy and empty and utterly lifeless. This was where they intended to place me while my house was sold out from under me. Andrew stood behind the staff member, smiling proudly, like he'd accomplished something admirable. "This is temporary," he said softly, "just until everything settles." I nodded. I smiled. I thanked the staff. And then, just as Andrew reached for my suitcase, I spoke. "I need to use the restroom first," I said calmly. Travel always unsettles my stomach. Andrew waved a hand. "Of course, Mom." Inside the restroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. My heart pounded hard now, but my mind was clear. Linda had been precise. I had instructions. I had already made the calls. What I needed now was time. I took out my phone and sent the message Linda had told me to send. "I'm here." Her response came almost immediately.
good.
"Leave when you can. Do not argue. Do not confront." I flushed the toilet, washed my hands, and stepped back into the hallway. Andrew looked relieved. "All good?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "But I left something important in the car." He frowned slightly. "What?" "My medication list." I lied smoothly. "The nurse will need it." Andrew hesitated. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Just grab it quickly." We walked back out to the parking lot. As soon as we reached the car, I opened the passenger door, took my purse, and stepped back. "I'm not going in," I said. Andrew blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said quietly, "I'm not staying." His smile faded. "Mom, don't do this." "I already have," I replied. Melissa scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being informed," I said. Andrew's jaw tightened. "Get in the car."
No.
For a moment, we stood there, the polite world of Sunnyridge moving around us, oblivious. Andrew lowered his voice. "You signed the papers. You don't get to change your mind now." "I do," I said. "And I have." His eyes hardened. "This isn't how it works." "It is now." He stepped closer. "You're confused. You don't understand what you signed." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You took my house. You took my money. And you thought I would notice." Melissa laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous." Andrew leaned in. "Mom, listen to me very carefully. You're going to embarrass yourself. Get back in the car." I met his gaze.
No.
Something flickered across his face. Anger.
Fear.
Calculation. "Fine," he said abruptly. "We'll talk about this later."
They drove away without me.
I stood there alone in the parking lot, heart racing, but I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I called a taxi and went straight to Carol's house, where Linda was waiting. The next few hours moved quickly. Too quickly. Papers were filed. Statements were taken. Linda explained everything in calm, measured tones, but the implications were terrifying. Andrew had already listed my house. A buyer was interested. The money from my savings was sitting in an account I couldn't access. We had to move fast. By Tuesday morning, a temporary restraining order was filed. The sale was halted. The account was frozen. Andrew was notified. He showed up at my house that afternoon. I wasn't alone. Carol was with me. Linda was on speakerphone. Andrew didn't knock. He pounded. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted the moment the door opened. I protected myself, I said. You accused me of theft, he snapped. Do you know what that does to my reputation? You should have thought of that, I replied, before you stole from me. Melissa pushed past him. You ungrateful old woman. Linda's voice cut through the room. This conversation is being documented. Andrew froze. Get that lawyer off the phone. No, I said. I'm done being quiet. He laughed, but it wasn't warm. You think this is over? You think you've won? I think you underestimated me, I said. His face twisted. You're going to regret this. That night, my phone rang nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, some pleading, some threatening. I saved them all. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. The days leading up to it were the longest of my life. Andrew's lawyer contacted Linda repeatedly, offering settlements that sounded generous until you listened closely. Partial refunds, temporary access, conditions. Linda refused them all. They're panicking, she told me. That's good. But panic makes people dangerous. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, surrounded by boxes half-packed and half-unpacked, the house in limbo just like me. I wondered how it had come to this, how the child I raised could look at me and see nothing but profit. At dawn, I dressed carefully. Navy suit, sensible shoes, hair neatly pinned. I wanted the judge to see me as I was, capable, clear, present. Andrew arrived at the courthouse with Melissa and a man in an expensive suit. He didn't look at me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Intimate, unforgiving. When the judge entered, my heart nearly burst from my chest. Andrew's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of concern. A worried son, a confused elderly mother. Necessary intervention. Then Linda stood. She spoke slowly,
Clearly.
She laid out the timeline, the pressure, the lack of independent counsel, the rapid transfer of assets, the frozen account. She called me to the stand. My voice trembled at first, but it steadied as I spoke. I told the truth. About the house, the papers, the money, the fear, the silence. Andrew's lawyer tried to trip me up, tried to confuse me, tried to make me look forgetful. I didn't let him. When the judge asked if I understood the proceedings, I looked her directly in the eye. Yes, I said. My son tried to steal my life. The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp. And then she spoke. The silence in the courtroom after the judge spoke, my name felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. It pressed down on my chest, making the air feel thick and difficult to breathe. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, steady but loud, like it was counting the seconds of my life. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the papers in front of her again, slowly, deliberately, as if she wanted everyone in the room to understand that this moment mattered. Andrew's lawyer shifted in his seat. Melissa crossed and uncrossed her legs, her heel tapping nervously against the floor. Andrew stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. This court takes allegations of undue influence and elder financial abuse very seriously, the judge said, her voice calm but firm. Especially when they involve immediate family members. Andrew finally turned toward me then. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were calculating, searching, looking for a way out. The judge continued. She went through the timeline Linda had presented. The speed with which the documents were signed. The lack of independent legal counsel for me. The immediate transfer of funds. The attempt to relocate me against my will. Each point landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward, impossible to ignore. Andrew's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised her hand. I will finish, she said coolly. She looked directly at Andrew. Mr. Carter, you assumed complete control over your mother's finances and property within days of obtaining power of attorney. You then transferred substantial funds into an account you controlled. Andrew opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was protecting her, he said finally. She needed care. The judge tilted her head slightly. Then why was the money not kept in an account solely in her name? Andrew hesitated.
Just for a moment.
And that moment was everything. I needed access, he said. In case of emergencies. The judge nodded slowly. Access does not require ownership. Linda stood and requested permission to present additional evidence. The judge granted it. What came next felt surreal. Bank statements, timelines, emails, messages Andrew had sent to Melissa about renovations, vacations, plans for after the sale. I watched his face change as each new piece of evidence was introduced. The confidence drained from him in real time. The man who had walked into that courtroom so certain of his control was unraveling thread by thread. Melissa whispered furiously to their lawyer. Andrew shook his head slightly, like he couldn't believe this was happening. When the judge finally spoke again, her decision was clear. The power of attorney was revoked. Immediately, the deed transfer was voided. All funds removed from my accounts were to be returned within 48 hours. A temporary restraining order was issued, preventing Andrew and Melissa from making any further financial or housing decisions on my behalf until a full investigation was completed. I didn't realize I was crying until Linda squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did it." Andrew stood abruptly. "This isn't over," he snapped. "You can't do this." The judge's gaze hardened. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." He froze. Slowly, reluctantly, he sat.
Court adjourned.
The hallway outside buzzed with quiet conversation, but I felt strangely removed from it all, like I was watching the world through glass. Andrew stormed past me without a word. Melissa followed, her face pale, lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Linda guided me to a bench. "This is just the beginning," she said gently. "But it's a strong beginning." I nodded. My legs felt weak, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in weeks. By the time I returned home that afternoon, the house felt different again. Not hollow this time.
Alive.
Still unsettled, yes, but no longer slipping away from me. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, door frames, furniture, grounding myself in what was real and what was still mine. That evening, the phone started ringing. Andrew called first. I didn't answer. Then Melissa. I let it go to voicemail. Then Andrew again. And again. Messages piled up, each one more frantic than the last. Apologies layered with accusations. Promises mixed with threats. "You didn't have to do this. We were just trying to help you. You're destroying this family." I saved every message. Linda had told me to. 2 days later, the money was back in my account. Every dollar. Seeing the balance restored made my knees buckle. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that I had not imagined any of this. Proof that I had been right to fight. But Andrew wasn't done. He showed up at my house the following week. I saw his car through the window and felt a familiar spike of fear rise in my chest. But this time I didn't freeze. I didn't hide. I picked up my phone and called Carol, then Linda. By the time I opened the door, I was not alone. Andrew stood on the porch, eyes red, hair unkempt, the confident mask completely gone. "Mom," he said softly, "please, just talk to me." I crossed my arms. "Say what you need to say." He stepped forward. "You didn't have to involve the courts. You could have trusted me." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "That's exactly what I did. And look where it got me." His voice cracked. I was under pressure. "So was I," I replied. But only one of us used power and paperwork to take something that didn't belong to them. Melissa appeared behind him. Her expression was tight, controlled. "You're overreacting," she said. "This has gone too far." "Too far," I repeated. "You tried to put me in a nursing home so you could sell my house." Andrew raised his hands. "We said we were sorry." "You said you were sorry you got caught," I corrected. His face hardened. "You're choosing strangers over your own son." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt something inside me shift. Grief, yes. But also clarity. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." His eyes widened slightly, as if that answer had never occurred to him. Linda's voice came through my phone speaker. "Andrew, You violate the court's order by being here. He froze. This is your only warning, she continued. Leave immediately. For a long moment, he stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize me at all. Then he turned and walked away without another word. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. But the story wasn't over yet. The investigation continued. The financial records raised questions that went beyond my case. Andrew's employer was contacted. An internal review was launched. Rumors spread quietly through our small community. And then one afternoon, Linda called me. They're recommending criminal charges, she said. My heart skipped. Against Andrew? Yes, she replied gently. For elder financial exploitation. I closed my eyes. The word echoed painfully. Criminal. Son. Exploitation. I need time, I said. Of course, Linda replied. But understand this. If you don't proceed, there may be others after you. Or before you. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at a framed photo of Andrew as a child, grinning with a missing front tooth, his arms slung around my shoulders. I remembered teaching him right from wrong. Honesty. Respect. Care for others. Somewhere along the way, he had learned something else instead. By morning, I had my answer. And when I called Linda back, my voice did not shake. I'm ready, I said. Let's finish this. Once I told Linda I was ready, things moved faster than I expected. I had imagined long delays, endless meetings, and weeks of waiting while my nerves slowly unraveled. Instead, the world seemed to snap into motion, like a trap finally sprung. Documents were filed. Statements were taken. Dates were set. Andrew was notified. And just like that, the situation shifted from something private and painful into something public and unavoidable. I wish I could say I felt relief right away. I didn't. What I felt was a deep, aching exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones after weeks of fear and vigilance. For days, I moved through my house like someone recovering from an illness. I cooked simple meals, watered the garden, and sat quietly by the window. I needed to remind myself that I was still here, still standing, still in control of my own life. Andrew didn't contact me again after Linda warned him to stay away, but the silence itself was loud. I could feel him out there somewhere, furious, humiliated, scrambling to fix what he'd broken. Mutual acquaintances began calling under the guise of concern, carefully phrased questions hiding curiosity. Had something happened to my son? Was it true there were lawyers involved? I kept my answers brief. This wasn't gossip. This was survival. 2 weeks later, Linda called with an update. Andrew's employer had placed him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. Apparently, once questions were raised about his handling of my finances, other transactions came under scrutiny. Patterns began to emerge. Small things at first. Gray areas. Ethical shortcuts. The kind of behavior that thrives when no one is watching. Melissa left him shortly after. I heard that from Carol, who heard it from someone else, who heard it from a friend of a friend. Melissa had moved out of their house, taking what she could. She told people she'd been blindsided, that she never imagined Andrew would take things that far. I almost laughed when I heard that. She had celebrated while I packed my life into boxes. She had smiled while my home was dismantled. Whatever story she was telling now was for her own protection, not the truth. The criminal charges were filed quietly. No dramatic arrest. No flashing lights. Just paperwork, official and final. Andrew was charged with elder financial exploitation. Seeing it written that way made my chest tighten, but it also steadied me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. When Andrew finally reached out again, it wasn't with anger or threats. It was with desperation. He wrote me a letter. 3 pages. Handwritten. I recognized the careful handwriting immediately, the same one I'd helped him practice when he was learning cursive. He apologized, but not the way I had hoped. His words circled responsibility without ever landing on it. He blamed stress, pressure, his marriage, his fear of losing control. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said he was trying to help. He never once said, "I was wrong." I read the letter once. Just once. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the fireplace. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but ash. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt closure. The court proceedings were quieter than the initial hearing, but no less heavy. Andrew accepted a plea deal. Probation. Mandatory counseling. Restitution of legal fees. A permanent record. No jail time, but the consequences followed him everywhere. His professional license was revoked. His reputation, once carefully polished, was gone. People talk, especially when the truth is ugly. I didn't attend the final hearing. Linda said I didn't have to, and I chose not to. I had already done enough. I had stood up. I had spoken. I had fought. That was enough for one lifetime. After it was over, something unexpected happened.
Peace.
Not immediately. It came slowly, cautiously, like a stray animal testing whether it was safe to return. But it came. I redecorated the house. Not because it needed it, but because I did. I moved furniture. Took down old curtains. Let more light in. I reclaimed the space in small, deliberate ways. Every change felt like a statement. I am still here. This is still mine. My friends became my family in a way I hadn't realized I needed.
Carol stopped by twice a week.
Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we sat in silence. Both felt equally supportive. Others from my bridge club checked in, bringing meals, offering rides, sharing their own quiet fears about aging, about children, about losing control. My story permitted them to speak. That mattered more to me than I expected. I returned to volunteering at the library. On my first day back, a young woman thanked me for helping her grandmother find legal resources after something similar had happened. I didn't ask for details.
I didn't need to.
I simply nodded and told her she wasn't alone. A year passed. I turned 73 in the same house I had lived in for nearly 4 decades. I celebrated quietly, surrounded by friends, cake, laughter, and the comforting warmth of belonging. I stood in my garden that evening, watching the sun dip below the trees, and felt a sense of pride. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing you protected yourself when it mattered most. I still think about Andrew sometimes. Not with anger, not with longing, just with a distant sadness. He made his choices. I made mine. Blood does not excuse betrayal. Love does not require surrender. If there is one thing I learned through all of this, it's that silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is a strategy. Sometimes it is survival. And sometimes it is the space you need to gather your strength. I was 71 years old when my son tried to erase me. I am 73 now, and I have never felt more alive. If you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your life, trust that feeling. Ask questions. Get help. Do not let anyone tell you that age means you no longer deserve control over your own choices. You do. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, you are never too old to stand up.